Might help if I unmute my mic. Well, that's going to bring me to my first announcement of this show. Welcome to the American Rising. As you can see, I am not a professional. My name is Barry Ramey. I spent 3 years in federal custody because of January 6th. I was a political prisoner of the United States of America, and I am free now. I have a full pardon from the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And for 3 years, the Department of Justice tried to silence me and my brothers and sisters on January 6th, our voices, our ideals, our love for this nation. And we're back now. So in the name of not getting complacent, I have started this show on the new War Boy Studio to talk about the dangers of Marxism and communism, the weaponization of a Department of Justice, and how either side of the political spectrum is only one vote away from turning our country into a communist state that we will never be able to dig ourselves out of. So if you're tired of watching on the left and the right fake politicians that lie to you, you want to see them exposed, the Marxists and the communists that are in your children's schools and their curriculum, then this is the show to you, for you. If you hate America First agenda, if you cannot stand conservative values and American values, I assure you, you are going to hate this show. And that puts a smile on my face. My first guest for the very first show is very special. And I thought about this last night. I don't think I'm going to have another guest on this show as significant as this individual because of how I met this person. While I was incarcerated at FCI Miami Low, an individual by the name of Tom Jeffries, he's a chairman for a conservative group out of Northern Virginia known as the Northern Neck Patriots. Tom Jeffries, who found him online through a book he wrote. Howell Woltz is the author of Justice Denied. Hal's story is very similar to, or it actually sets the pace for what January 6ers went through. In my personal opinion, Howell would be the very first January 6er because of the story that he is going to tell that the Department of Justice and the FBI put him through deliberately. Why? Well, I'm going to let him tell that. And I assure you, it's going to remind you a lot of what we've been going through. It's going to remind you a lot of the weaponization against Donald Trump. And Hal's story predates all of that. And without any further ado, I will bring Hal in. Hal, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and congratulations on your show. I'm so proud of you guys for not letting them get you down and keep you down. The American Rising, that's a good title.
They picked the wrong group, I guess, but you know, it was a lot of trials and tribulations, that you are actually very familiar with.
You've been there, done that, I guess you could say. But the fact that you have bounced back so quickly and so aggressively is a real testament to the courage of you guys and the gals that were with you. It's tremendous, and this show should be a great hit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So how I was introduced to Hal by his book. His book was sent to me by, again, this individual from the Patriot Group, Tom Jeffries, and he found it very indicative to how our situation was being portrayed and taken advantage of. And so Tom got in touch with Hal. And Tom got Hal in touch with all of the J6ers while we were in prison. While I was in prison, I read Hal's book cover to cover 2 times, and it was bittersweet. It was good on one hand because I felt justified that we weren't the only ones going through this. On the other hand, it was a lot of anxiety to read that this was a reoccurring event in American society. So Hal, let's start off with your story. Where does Justice Denied begin? Take me to the day that you were arrested and tell people why you were arrested and what happened.
Well, the government asked me if I would help them on a client that I'd had years before, who happened to have been the former chairman of the North Carolina Republican Party. He was a former judge. He was an aide to Jesse Helms, and unfortunately, had been the man that tried to keep a corrupt judge in North Carolina off the bench when Jimmy Carter appointed him. So this goes way back. So they targeted Sam Curran to go after him. I had been his trustee for his law firm years before, fired myself because I couldn't get source of funds information. So I got a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Charlotte, North Carolina. They asked me if the next time I was in the States, if I would be willing to talk to them. I said, sure, that's part of my job. So I was on my way to meet with the U.S. Attorney, Matthew Martins, when I was kidnapped at my farm at the end of the road in another jurisdiction, by the way, where the FBI was out of jurisdiction. They had no jurisdiction or authority. And the jurisdiction that did hold sway over me and my person was the Middle District. And so they dragged me in chains to the Western District and arraigned me on charges that made no sense at all. I had no idea what they were talking about. And in their first interview of me in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, they admitted that I had done nothing, but they wanted me to make up or read their script basically on this guy, Sam Curran, who was the real target they were after. So it was my first taste of how the system worked. It wasn't even about me. And it wasn't about many of you. I mean, I've seen these photos now and videos of guys and grannies walking through the Capitol, their own public house, and being arrested and incarcerated for years. It's absolutely disgusting. And they target the people for a political purpose, it seems now, in most cases, have no case against them, then create the case, force them to plead guilty to something they did or didn't do. Maybe not, they didn't even know about it, as in my case, because it was years after they were asking me to say things that had happened. I said, guys, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. But they said, all right, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're the target. So I spent 7 years thinking about that and working. But anyway, it was successful time spent spiritually and in building my person, because I got to help many, many people and learned how disgusting the system was, wrote that book, smuggled it out of prison, and it became a bestseller.
That is awesome. And so were you ever actually charged with a crime?
Oh, they read a slate of charges and they lied and held up a stack of papers and said, this guy's a felon. He's committed crime after crime. And this very nice magistrate judge says, guys, come on. So let me see. I jumped up and said, that's a damn lie. I've never even had a speeding ticket, which I was wrong. I had a warning when I was 17. But anyway, I found out from the judge, but it was a pack of empty papers. So the judge riddled through the paper and says, come on, guys, this is crazy. Let this guy go. So that was released on unsecured bond. So that's when they took me to the judge who was behind the whole scheme to get even with Sam Curran, 2 federal jurisdictions away. And I never saw another day of freedom until I was forced to be released.
Ugh. So how many facilities did they move you to in total?
I don't remember the number of facilities, but I was moved 29 times and actually put that from the federal record in the back of the book. Some of them were black sites and places that have been closed, and they were keeping people who were basically whistleblowers that they didn't want out. A lot of military guys I met who had told about them, they were literally in Afghanistan to grow heroin and protect the crops for the CIA's money flow. And some of those guys, but anyway, I was just moved time and time again to keep me from getting representation or getting my story out. And some courageous people made that happen anyway.
That's awesome. So you went through the ringer. You got to see all these different federal facilities. What is, or in jails as well in the process, what is the most, is how many, when it comes to diesel therapy, we didn't say the name of that. That's what that's called, diesel therapy, moving facility. I'm personally convinced that this is cruel and unusual, against the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And I think that it only benefits the prosecution trying to break somebody down to take a plea that doesn't favor the person, or might not even be an actual thing, something that they're guilty of. But when you go through this process and you're moved from place to place, you're packed up in the middle of the night, you're not told where you're going to go, your property doesn't come with you, doesn't make it to you, your money doesn't follow you, you can't get commissary, you don't get out to exercise. It is a form of torture in my personal humble opinion. What is the most times that you've seen anybody that you know of? How many times have you seen somebody moved or heard of somebody getting moved in the process known as diesel therapy?
I don't know, but I was moved 29 times, and once or twice, like we were talking about that horrible Atlanta prison where Al Capone did his time. I got to visit there 3 times, and that was unnecessary in every case. One time they just took me there for the night, made me sleep on the floor with the rats and everything. We talked about that just for the hell of it, and then brought me right back to Charlotte the next day, which wasn't even the jurisdiction. But it's not only bad policy and bad government, it's against federal rules of criminal procedure. Once they have arraigned you, you cannot be moved out of the district of charge for any reason unless you're going for psychiatric treatment or something that is important to you that you've asked for. So moving me and you and everybody all those times is strictly torture. And every time you go into a new facility, you're tried. I mean, somebody, they assign you a bed. No, you're not getting that bed. Even when I had a broken shoulder one time from a fight in Charlotte, they sent me to some place down on the Georgia border, a private prison. And anyway, it's just you're tried at every stop, and it's mental torture. It's tough to go through, especially I was in my 60s, the 50s then. That was 20 years ago. But it's really cruel and unusual punishment, not to say the least, and it's against the federal rules of criminal procedure and the Sixth Amendment. But they do it all the time.
I think we're having a Wi-Fi connection problem, Hal. Sorry about this.
You're back.
All right, there we go. So let me ask you this: what was going through your mind? So you're now in the beginning stages of this. You're charged, or you're threatened to be charged. You really don't know what's going on. You're being moved from facility to facility to facility. What is going through your mind at this time? How are you finding out what's really happening to you? Do you know what's going on at this point, or are you still trying to figure out and piece together why you're charged, why you're in custody, and why you're being moved around like this?
I had no idea at the time, but then after they had taken me down to the Eastern District to revoke the bond I was granted by the Court of Jurisdiction, and the judge behind the whole scheme, this Judge Earl Britt, horrible man, that's still 92 years old, still on the bench, ruining lives every day. I don't understand how they do it. But anyway, he revoked my bond, threw me in the Wake County Jail, which is a horrible little place where there were like 60 plus men on the floor because they have no bunks for them, and there were 20 some rooms. There were over 80 people. So I said, okay, I've got to figure out why this is, and there was a lot of asking God that same question. Why me? What the hell did I do? I've tried to be a good person, and it was a while before I got my answer. But after hearing the stories of these people and realizing I wasn't the only one, I was just one of almost everybody. There were some bad guys that belonged in jails and prisons and everything else, but most of them cut a deal quickly because they knew the system. They were right back on the streets. It was the people who had no idea what they were doing, or the alleged co-conspirators where rival gang members would say, oh yeah, they did it. Here are the names of these guys in another gang. And then they would testify against them. Horrible situation, but I was just one of the gang. They were violating everybody in every way. And it wasn't until that first meeting with the U.S. attorneys, the FBI, they had IRS people, everybody that was after after the chairman of the political hack, that they were after. They were all there trying to make me say things or ask me, say, well, if you'll just say this, we'll let you go. And I said, how the hell can you even act like that? This is the United States of America. What do you mean if I say this, things that aren't true, you let me go? I've done nothing. And this guy, Matthew Martin's the U.S. attorney, or assistant U.S. attorney, he said, he leaned back in his chair and said, all of you out there have done something. We just haven't gotten around to you yet. And I thought, okay, I get it now. So that was the game. And when I wouldn't play along, I ended up just getting moved around and around and around.
Yeah, that's the whole we can indict a ham sandwich if you give us a chance.
Amen. No
Now,
mayonnaise.
yeah. So, oh God, how about prison mayonnaise? That stuff's good, huh?
Wow. It actually it would be. Most of it was dry crap, and then I did spend a little time in a federal facility and ended up in the kitchen. And I'll never forget when we got some Wendy's burgers from the 1980s that were like little bricks. That's because they get a write off if they donate them or get paid for it. I don't know. And the worst, I guess, was we got a load of fish in from SeaWorld down in Florida that was so rotten and foul that the orcas wouldn't even eat it. So
Oh
they
God.
were going to feed it to us. But anyway, it's a disgusting enterprise, completely foul, corrupt in every way. Everybody's on the take, and these dudes are on a power trip from the man on the bench with the black robe to the pinstripe guys that won't defend you to the prosecutors who are in it just to get a political name and become a judge or a politician. And it's got to change. And I believe with all of my heart that we finally have somebody in office that is listening, and he's seen how the judges are and that they think they're gods themselves and want to run the show. They're trying to be president now, one after another, trying to enforce what the president can and cannot do. And I think it's finally we've reached the tipping point where people are waking up and realizing these corrupt son of a bitches have got to go. They've got to be cleaned out. And that's what inspired the idea of the district court that I sent to you to create a new court of ombudsman. So you could never be treated like you were treated. I could never be treated like I was treated. We have a place to appeal to immediately so they can stop the crimes against humanity before they commit them.
Sure. And we're gonna get into that a little bit. I believe that's Article 3 that you're referring to in Poland.
Correct. That's
All
just
right.
the article in the Constitution that has to do with courts. But the only court authorized in the Constitution is the Supreme Court. All the others have been created by Congress. There are dozens of them. Every court of appeal, for example, but also labor relations courts, bankruptcy courts, courts of international settlement. Those are all creations of Congress. So what I'm asking and suggesting is not to be the first, be one of 160 other nations who have created these courts where when the government is violating your rights and someone under color of law is doing it, then you can appeal directly to an ombudsman that's elected in your jurisdiction of congressional district, and that person has the authority not only to hear your case and grant immediate relief if you're being violated constitutionally, but also seek redress against the government person who, under color of law, violated your rights. It's one of the oldest laws there is, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242. And when the prosecutors and the judges and the defense attorneys generally, in my case for sure, and I'll get to that in a minute, I think in yours as well, when they collude together, that is a conspiracy against rights. And if they caused a death during that conspiracy, they can be put to death, but they can also be charged $1 million, 10 years in prison. So that law, but how are you going to get it enforced when those guys run the game?
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
we need a separate court that is not under the control of the DOJ or the judiciary or these foul organizations that have infected the process, but a separate court and an ombudsman elected in every congressional district that has that authority. Not a lawyer. There's no requirements other than a person who has read the Constitution and understands the concepts therein and will enforce them. Give them a staff, give them a court, and we, the people, are back in charge of protecting ourselves from the other side. You put a few judges in jail, as seems to finally be happening now. Praise God. But if you put a few
Yes,
judges and
sir.
prosecutors who have violated your rights in prison, it's going to stop fast, quick, and in a hurry.
Oh yeah. Definitely. I mean, unless they have consequences to fear for their actions, why would anybody stop anything? That's the whole reason that we created the judicial system for, is because we're hoping it acts as a deterrent to prevent people from doing things. If it doesn't stand there, then there's no deterrent, and we see what happens.
Amen. And not to dwell on my case, but you did ask the question. But in mine, the prosecutor in the Western District, and the judge in the Eastern District who poached the case that they colluded. They committed, according to an AP reporter, a legal reporter who read my book and contacted me and interviewed me after my nightmare was over. She found 54 federal crimes that the judge and the prosecutor had committed, for hundreds of years in prison, but who's going to charge them? That's the problem.
Yeah.
They're not going to charge themselves. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you have the investigators investigating themselves, then there's no investigation that's actually happening, and that's just human nature. Let's stop pretending. I mean, like it's almost the same as when Joe Biden said he's not going to pardon his son. I mean, come on. Nobody would have blamed you if you just said, yes, I'm going to pardon my son, because I don't think there's any father on the planet in your position that would have not pardoned their son. So,
to say Biden told a lie.
Oh no, I would never say that.
Y'all might have to leave
the show. I want to get into some of the emotional things in your book that took place, and I want to talk about now the FBI then goes after your wife and arrests her at the time. She was your wife at the time, and she literally had nothing to do with anything. She knew nothing of what was going on. You knew nothing was going on, but she especially so. And they arrested her simply to hold her as leverage over you to elicit whatever they wanted to elicit. So talk about that. What happened there with your wife when they arrested her? What did they do to her? And what do you think their goal, and what did they try to do?
Well, they put her in jail too, and kept coming to me and saying, "You want to let her go? Then here's all you got to say. You're going to say this in court." And I say, "I can't. I've got to live in this skin, whether it's in an orange jumpsuit or a three-piece suit. I'm the same person. I can't do that." And her family, of course, was begging me, to say whatever you have to say. And then they came in the prison cell when I was in solitary in the murderer's pod. They called it on 6800 in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. If anybody wants to look it up, that's its nickname. And there's a reason they call it the murderer's pod, because that's who dwells there. And this Mrs. Johnson, I'll never forget her. She was a guard. She came in one night and had them open my cell. And she said, "Mr. Woltz, you need to do whatever they tell you to do. We've already taken your wife to the hospital, to Charlotte Memorial, once thinking she was dead. Says she's not going to make it out of here." And so I ended up, calling the U.S. attorney the next day. This was after a year of being moved and solitary and all of that stuff. And she was in the same jail when I was passing through on diesel therapy. But it was incredible. So I called him and said, "I will not say anybody did anything that I don't know about. If you have to say that they did it, then I'll say that I won't argue with you. I won't dispute it. But you're saying things I don't know." And that was the closest I came to a plea deal. Never did go to court.
That is unbelievable. So they used your wife as leverage to get you to elicit a testimony that clearly never happened. So now they have two human lives in their control, torturing them, because let's face it, if you're guilty, jail's still torture. When you're not guilty, and as it should be, but when you're not guilty and you're being tortured, the emotional impact, that has, and I want to be very clear, I am not one of these people. I do accept my responsibility on January 6th. Excuse me. But there was so many men and women on January 6th that were completely not guilty. They did nothing wrong. And they were put through the ring. Some of them were put through the ringer worse than I was, who actually got into a physical altercation with a Capitol police officer. I don't condone my actions. I don't promote my actions. I wish I could take them back. But again, the story that never got told was 35 minutes prior to me getting into a tussle with the Capitol Police, they launched a barrage of assaults on us. And, I let myself get the best of me, and, the rest, the story's been told. But you and your wife and so many other millions of Americans put in this process are completely innocent, did not break any rules or laws, and they're put through this system designed to break hardened criminals. And now let's get to the point. Let's get to the point in the book that you now have an attorney. You have several attorneys coming to you, and they're basically working with the prosecution. Am I correct?
100%. Absolutely. despicable, one after another after another. My family, my brother, God bless him, he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these guys. And the only one that tried to help me was a black guy named Tolly Kennan III. Wonderful gentleman. He came and he said, don't even think about hiring me unless you want to fight them. And I said, you're my man. It's the first, it's music to my ears. So what did they do? They just suspended his license within weeks and tried to take me to court. They took me to court along with several others and said that I had to say something bad about Kennan. So I got up and gave a speech that he was the only attorney that tried to help me, and gave him a lesson on how corrupt their system was and everything else. So that didn't help my cause any, but they took the one attorney who tried to help me and suspended his license.
And you actually went through quite the ringer as far as legal representation is concerned. You had several lawyers that weren't working for you, that were actually working against you. And then some pretty nefarious things happen when it comes to your legal representation. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your entire lawyer process, what that looked like from you while you're being incarcerated. The ability to actually have real conversations with your attorney is very, very few and far between recorded lines that they listen to, not letting your attorney visit unchaperoned or unsupervised, prying eyes always watching, and then the very dark stuff with your legal defense. Go ahead and talk about that process. What it was like for you trying to have legal representation, and what the Department of Justice did to block and deny that.
Well, the first guy was found by my family through an ex-wife who was actually a judge in Winston-Salem. So he shows up with the U.S. attorneys and the agents. And I said, I don't want to meet with you here. I want to talk to you about fighting this case, not, you in here with these guys. He said, no. Just listen. I've got a really good deal for you. And that was the first meeting I had with that attorney. He was absolutely worthless and has since died. And well, anyway, I'll leave it at that. I didn't make it to the funeral, but he was completely horrible. And so that's when I kept telling my family that these guys are working against me, not for me. They hired another bunch of monkeys. One of them had actually worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office, but it was just one disaster after another, which is illegal, by the way, according to the bar rules. A guy who worked on the case can't then jump over to a private firm and represent you and claim he's defending you. Completely didn't defend me in any way. But then they allowed me to be taken out of the district, which is against the rules. And when I made it to Raleigh, North Carolina, to this corrupt judge's court, where they took my legally granted bond and said, no, we're taking that away. A young girl from Charlotte had driven all the way to Raleigh, which is a long 2.5 hours through 2 federal jurisdictions, got up and said, Judge Britt says, I'm from the attorney's office and public defender's office in Charlotte. You can't have this man here. You have violated, she started reading off the statutes, which I did not know at that time, federal rules, saying I couldn't be moved out of the district. He slammed, so he was going to break his gavel and said, you sit down and shut up. This is my courtroom. Says, I'll tell you when you get on. She said, this man can't be here. And so then this wannabe, sellout, David Friedman was his name, jumps up and said, well, I'm his representation. So he's got a private counsel now. So the public defender doesn't need to do that. So Judge Britt told her to leave the courtroom. But that's the only person that helped me until the black guy, Tolly Kennan, wonderful man, also a preacher, and ended up having to preach for a living because he took his law license and suspended it for trying to help me.
That is unbelievable. Now you have.
Well, I wish you. I want to challenge that. You've been around these guys. My story is like everybody else's that I tried to help. So, well, no, I don't even know about that. I don't know about this, And there's some bad guys. I tried not to work on their cases, but I worked on over 400 federal criminal cases during that 7 years trying to help other people. Once I got my message, and when I asked why am I here, and my answer was, you're supposed to do something about it, spread the word, and try to help people, which is what I took that as a mission from then on, as you've read my more recent book about the spiritual side of that journey. But it was horrifying that not one single case, not out of the 400, not one single case did I find where the judge, prosecutor, and usually the defense attorney, as they call themselves, in combination and conspiracy, did not violate the rights of the person to find that plea or case of guilt. It's absolutely disgusting. And it was every single, I cannot think of one single case I ever worked on where they followed the law. And that should shock everybody in America.
Yeah. Yeah. And, side note, I, like you're saying, I do believe that God has a plan here and that we were put through this situation and brought and crossed each other's paths and lives for a reason. And I do feel that you you were the first person to really be able to expose what certain communities, black communities, minority communities in America have been actually screaming for a long time. And unfortunately, Americans weren't really listening to how corrupt the system really is. Sure, you may have some people that are guilty of a crime, some of them a bad crime. The a lot of them are charged with and indicted with things that they really do not deserve to be indicted with. And the ability to fight these cases and prove in the court of law when you may not have a significant education, when you may not understand how law works, when you don't know what habeas corpus is, it's very easy to take advantage of these people. And that's anybody in that situation. And they've been saying this for a long time. And I truly believe that January 6th, our job is to expose what people have been saying for a long time. And if we don't do that, then we're missing God's calling for us. And I truly believe that. And you actually went through a spiritual shift. I remember reading in your book, you were very in touch with Native American culture and spirituality. And you actually you were on the Native American car, if I'm not mistaken, at one point. You went to the sweat lodges and they gave you a hard time of that, of course, but you truly embraced Native American spirituality and concepts and stuff. And it was very enlightening. And then you had a shift and you became a Christian, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, and that was a more recent shift. But I actually was running sweat lodge ceremonies in federal prisons. I was very much into it, and I have family heritage from the Cherokee as well, and an ancestor who was actually a white chief of the Cherokee, William Holland
Nice.
Thomas. So anyway, but that's a side I have since dedicated my life to Jesus Christ and find that as the only path in my world these days. But yes, it was a spiritual shift. I sat in that solitary cell for literally weeks, whining, why me, and I believe I've told you I wrote in the book that they had the door open for an hour, as they do even in murderers' pods. They have to open for 1 hour and let you run to the shower or whatever. And this young black man came in. He was absolutely huge. He's like a mountain. And he said, "Hey, will you help me with my case?" And I said, I'd be glad to if I knew anything, but I don't know anything. So why are you asking me? He said, "You're a white man with glasses. You got to know something about the law." I laughed. I said, "Well, I'm not sure about your logic, but I was a licensed trust and estate practitioner, so I'd had to study law of trust." But I said, "I know nothing about criminal law." And he said, "Well, just look at my case. Look at my case." So they started yelling for him to leave my cell door and all that. But I got the paperwork and looked through it, and I was horrified. It was absolutely so clear that this could not even be the guy they had arrested 22 months before. That man had been
Wow.
sitting in the murderer's pod. They've been trying to get him to say he robbed somebody that he hadn't robbed. And when I read the report, they said that it was a it was a bearded guy, a clean shaven. No, because it had the pictures. Clean shaven guy, about 165 pounds. Well, J.R. Stevenson was like the Jolly Green Giant in black and big as a house and everything. And he had a horrible wreck as a young man. His neck was twisted so badly. They called him turkey neck, way behind his back where you couldn't hear him, obviously, but he was a mountain. And so I said, this can't even be the same guy. So I figured out how to file a habeas case, but also filed charges against the policeman who arrested him knowing that they were lying, and the chief of police in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, who had, or Charlotte City, who had allowed this to go on for 22 months. And that man was released within 2 or 3 weeks. And we filed $1 million suit against the cops, for his incarceration and trouble and everything. The last message I got from J.R. Fitzgerald Stevenson was a thank you note with his first JR's Country Kitchen. It was his first menu, country with a K. And anyway, it was funny.
Oh yeah,
that was the first guy I got freed, and I slept like a baby that night. And I said, okay, I got it. This is what I'm supposed to do. So for the next 7 years, I did that day and night and night and day.
Yeah, you became known as a reputable, because let's face it, some of them are not very reputable, jailhouse lawyer. You were winning cases for people from confined inside, people's whose cases were very, very clear that they were innocent or that something was done wrong against them, and lawyers with law degrees were unable to accomplish what you were doing for these men. And so tell me a little bit about that, how you became a jailhouse lawyer, as it's called. And not only that, you were really good at it.
Well, I was pissed off. I guess that's it. And I had the advantages, as you mentioned before. This has been going on for decades, but mostly with poor people, people of color. And I happened to, have degrees and came from a good family and had the advantages. And they expected me, I guess, to fold and go back to my easy life and lie about this guy from the years after I'd had no association with him. And I wouldn't do it, but I decided, all right, let me start looking at people's cases. So I learned to do the motions by looking at their paperwork and seeing motions that were filed. So figured out how to do that with my golf pencil. You may remember that. And I had no commissary money, so people would get me paper and everything, and I would do motions in pencil. And bit by bit, I would learn the statutes. I had to start memorizing things because they wouldn't let me in the law library. But after I got JR freed, it was on. That was the beginning of it. And then when I found out about that lawyer from that law that I sent you a copy of, 18 USC 3162 A2, then I started teaching everybody how to do that. I remember one night before they pulled me out to send me to Atlanta again at midnight that night, I had a whole table of people writing motions for releasing prisoners under 18 USC 3162 A2. And this horrible judge who was by then running things in Charlotte, Frank Whitney, I hope he's off the bench by now, he may not be. But Whitney actually convened a hearing and had all the lawyers that were authorized to be before his court. And he said, I want to know who's been teaching these damn prisoners about this particular law, because he forbid it to be even used in his court. And they would sanction and try to disbar any attorney who followed the law. Now, that law just says if you're not tried within the allotted 70 days under 3161C, then you must be released unless you have excludable delays under 3161H. I'm giving the numbers in case anybody wants to know what I'm talking about. And 18 USC 3162 A2 says that you got to release them on motion of the defendant, not got to think about it, not consider it. It says the prisoner shall be released. So your attorney, that McBride guy that was saying he was defending all of you, and all of us were sending money hoping he would, I sent him the law and I said, McBride, just file the motions for all their release under 3162 A2. They got to let them go. Wouldn't do it. So they all know this law, but they refuse to apply it, or this wouldn't be a crisis.
Wow. So, and now what was it the case manager, the officer that did not like the fact that you were teaching people this information?
Well, in the murderer's pod, they had behind, glass where you were under observation, and there were two officers because we were such dangerous criminals that you had to have two of them hidden behind the bulletproof glass. So they changed every shift. So every 8 hours, you had two more. So I was running through 6 officers a day. So I don't know that they knew what I was doing. What really got me on the radar and in big trouble was the sheriff there found out about that I'd helped publish a newspaper. It was funny. It was Pablo Escobar's cousin, Walter, was in the murderer's pod with me. And he said, I'd studied Spanish for 7 years, so I could get along with it pretty well. And he said, well, we need somebody to write the articles. I'll help with the translations. So we put together a paper called Despierta America, Wake Up America, and published it in Spanish. His family in New York were printing it and literally mailing it to all these people all over the prison system in the East Coast. I don't know if we made it beyond the East Coast or not. But boy, I remember this Sheriff Pendergraft come in and scream my name, and they opened my cell and came out. Had that newspaper, Despierta America, Howell Woltz, editor, slapped me in the chest, said, "Back to your shit, you're going with me." And it's that was where I really got to ride around and see some scenic sights. But for weeks it was hard. Then they stuck us in some little jail in the eastern part of North Carolina that had been condemned. And the nurse I had by then MRSA and sores and all kinds of crap, that you can't avoid. And so this wonderful, nice lady, Mrs. DeWalt, she was the nurse in this horrible jail in some county jail down east that had been shut down. She said, your people aren't even supposed to be go in that building. It's been condemned, but the feds put people they want to torture in that building. And one of my buddies got slashed with a razor, by another bad boy in there. I mean, it was just crap. But they would move you around to places like that when you messed with them. And
Yeah.
publishing a newspaper in prison, they considered messing with them, I guess. But
yeah, I actually, when I was in prison, I put in a request to the warden to be able to teach a class about the Constitution, and I even offered to pay for 100 mini pocket constitutions in English and Spanish out of my own pocket to be able to teach the class. And no, it was vastly denied, shut down immediately.
Oh no, don't you bring up that Constitution. That is
yeah. It was pretty eye-opening, that exchange between the warden and I. So now you're in the middle of this process. You're just starting to figure this out. You realize that this is being done to you on purpose. And one night you are awoken from bed and told that you're going to be released, that you're ready to go. And this wasn't what you thought it was it? Tell me a little bit about that, about being taken to R&D, receiving and departures, and saying, hey, Hal, you can walk out that front door. Go on. What happened with that?
Well, that's what I mentioned about the guards behind the glass. You got to know every one of them because they came to lock you in or let you in or out whenever you had to do something. And this guy that I'd never seen before comes in, different uniform. So it's like midnight, 1 o'clock, something like that. So he has them pop the cell, says, pack your shit, come with me, you're being released. And I said, I'd like to see some paperwork. He says, I said, pack your shit and come with me. And you don't really have a lot of choice. So I backed up my extra pair of underwear I'd been able to scrounge off commissary by the end, and I was packed. So we go down there, and they start saying, well, you're free to go. And I said, no, I've been through this enough now that I know you're either pulling something or you've got paperwork. It's one of the two things, and I want to see the paperwork. I want to see a signature releasing me. No, the paperwork's upstairs and it's middle of the night. You're free to go. They even opened the doors to the release and everything. I was in my street clothes. They grabbed me in months before by that. And I sat on the bench and said, I'm not moving until I see some paperwork. I know what you're doing. You're trying to set me up for an escape charge, and I'm not going to fall for it. So, well, no, you just sit there a while. I'll get the paperwork. And then one by one, they all started disappearing out of it, left me completely alone with the doors open, nice spring night in 2006, and told me I could leave. Now, if I'd walked out that door, it'd either been a hail of bullets or, somebody arrested me. I'd figured that out by then, but that was one of the two times I was really scared. Was I knew these son of bitches are going to kill me, and that's what they were after. So then the shift changed the next morning, and this black sergeant walks in. I had not seen him before, but he was in official capacity. He was in the bureaucracy part, not the guard part. And he said, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I told him the story. So he locked me in a closet and left me in there until the next shift. So I hadn't eaten or, been to the bathroom or anything, ever since it started. So the next day, then they put me on a bus to the federal prison in Atlanta, the old one, not the new one, where you got to enjoy that too. I had
Yep.
no idea what the hell was happening, but they said, well, pack him off to Atlanta. So I got down there. I'm the very last guy off the two buses, and everything. That they couldn't figure out what to do with me because they had no paperwork either. So the U.S. attorney in Charlotte had done that just to, I don't know, just to mess with me, I guess. But I didn't fall for the "you're free to go" ruse. But it is, you know, I got hate mail 10, 12 years ago when I first wrote that book. People saying, I just you can't even be saying such things about our wonderful system of justice and our fantastic FBI. These guys had seen Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. like I had in the old FBI show. Rah, rah, rah. My great uncle was one of the first FBI agents. I grew up with this lore, the stories. I revered them. And then I saw them up close and personal. They are sons of bitches. They are criminals. And I hope their day cometh, and I hope it cometh right soon. But they did things that people didn't want to believe. I told you, I believe, when we talked last week, that one of those guys that had written me a horrible letter, prominent businessman from North Carolina, that my family knew his family, and he chastised me, said, "You shouldn't write things like that. It's horrible." And I think it was last year, maybe 18 months ago, wrote me a letter over here in Poland that says, "I want to apologize before I die for my hate mail to you about that book. I've now had friends and family, and I know a dozen people that have been through similar situations," and says, "You were absolutely right. You just happened to be the first that was able to tell the story."
Yeah, you really are. Your story is so similar, and a lot of ours aren't even this bad, and ours were pretty bad. And I don't think that hopefully you are the only one that was treated like this, but you and I both know that's far from the truth. Majority of the federal inmates in federal prison right now are not as bad as you think they are or you told they are, and a lot of them are completely innocent men. I never thought I would get to prison. And correct me if your situation was different, please let me know. My experience in prison, 14 facilities in 16 months, a total of 17 facilities total by the time I was designated. Um, I met more good people in prison than bad people by far.
Absolutely, and some of my best friends to this day are the people that I met there, and done business with. Honest, good, decent people who were similarly attacked for they were in the like. There's one wonderful doctor who used to teach at MIT. 308 patents this man has in his name, but he invented this lens process that the biggest lens maker in the world didn't want. So they literally, I worked on his case. That's how I know all this. And so they literally made up a case against him about a tax thing from 16 years before, way beyond the statute of limitations, and threatened to take everything he owned if he didn't sign over a trust documents, ownership of his house, all of his toys and assets, and go away to prison to stop his $100 million IPO that was supposed to be the next day. So instead, it's said
Wow.
he ends up in prison. A wonderful guy. Still, we were like brother. His kids, like my kids. Anyway, wonderful man, and they did that just to destroy him. So those are my friends. A world champion rodeo cowboy and wonderful guy. Worked on his case, got him, his released because they charged him with it was a conspiracy to attempt to obtain marijuana. And if you can't remember that statute right off the top of your head, that's because there isn't one. So anyway, we finally got Chester Ray Williams released on that one. But some of the most wonderful guys, the great guy who ran across the Sahara Desert raising money for wells for Africans, Charlie Engle, world famous runner. They had him in there, worked on his case. Great guy. They blamed the entire mortgage fraud on him, and he was in Africa running with Matt Damon's fundraiser and everything when the fraud appeared, and it was the bankers that did it. Anyway, but these people are wonderful guys that they got attacked, and they were either making them the scapegoat of some crime that the big boys committed, or they were trying to stop them from from hurting one of the big boys that mattered. Or in my case, they just needed somebody to rat out the politician they were trying to destroy.
Yeah, but it's like when I first heard the statement, "You can indict a ham sandwich," it didn't really register. Like, okay, I get the crux of what you're trying to say here, but
You
when
got
you
it down,
finally
don't you?
get involved into the federal system, they are literally meaning that they can indict a ham sandwich if you let them. They can create the Sidney Powell wrote an epic book, License to Lie. Sidney Powell
Read it.
was a former federal prosecutor, and she was also a prosecutor on the Enron scandal. And what
Right.
she watched the
No,
federal
she was
government
defense
do.
attorney on Enron.
Oh, the defense correction. Yes. She saw firsthand how deep the corruption in the federal government goes, as far as the Department of Justice. And she wrote a book, License to Lie, and it really began to open it up. And then you look at situations like yours and all of my J6 brothers and sisters, and you realize there is a very nefarious aspect to the Department of Justice and the federal prosecutorial department of them. And there's a lot of things that they are able to get away with, and License to Lie literally hits the nail on the head there. They have a license to lie. They can create anything they want to create against you. It is up to the judge and the jury to decide what's true, but they're not held accountable if it's found to be not true. um, in my case, I was accused of threatening an FBI agent. I won't get into the specifics. It's for another day. Long story short, I did not threaten an FBI agent. The FBI agent acted extremely illegal and did not follow the rules of engagement, and accused me of something that I didn't do. And I was almost charged with it. Fortunately, I was able to get that thrown out, but they didn't care. There was no consequences for them lying. They just said he threatened an FBI agent. Now there's 100 news articles that say I did it. And of course, the charges were never filed, they were dropped. And that doesn't change the narrative. And my bond was denied twice because the judge believed I was out there threatening FBI agents.
That's right.
So the
Well,
damage
in
was done. And
98.6% of the cases, there is no jury. So that's how they voted. But I'm in touch with Sydney, and she, by the way, is in favor of our Article 3 courts. So,
good. I Sydney might actually be my new attorney going forward. So that's
excellent.
really good. I have a lot of
Well,
respect for that woman. And so we're gonna get into Article 3 and why, because you're not just an individual that went through a problem or had a problem. You're an individual that went through it and continued your life's work to find solutions to fix that problem. And I believe that Article 3 may be one of those solutions. Is there anything else you would like to say before we get into that about the context of this book, your story, anything people need to know about Howell Woltz and how you were treated by the United States federal government so poorly to the point now where you actually decided the country that you love very much, you now live in Poland, and you do that because well, I'll let you tell it. Why is it that you moved to Poland? What else do you have to say about your experience in the system, and what else would you want Americans to know about Howell Woltz?
well, the wonderful the wonderful man who is responsible for getting that book, the first version of it published, that I snuck it out of prison. He carried it with him when he was released. The same doctor that I'm talking about that had all the patents they destroyed. His son was in college at the Savannah School of Art and Design. They're studying filmmaking, and he took the book and made a film about it. And that ended up winning awards all over the world. He was one of the top 4 student films in the world in 2014, I believe it was. And we won several awards, the Savannah Film Festival, and all of these awards, 8 of them, I believe it was. So he did a great job, and that hit the hit the news. And so then I was asked to do a TED talk on the corruption in the judicial system. So I gave a TED talk, and that went viral. That book had hit a nerve and was zooming through the prison system. So I had 2 federal marshals come from the court of the corrupt judge in Raleigh, North Carolina, Judge Britt, who is still on the bench today. And they threatened me and said, if you don't shut up and quit talking about all of what happened to you and writing these books and all this crap, said, we're going to do it to you again. You know, they had the big Glocks and the wraparound shades and all that. Pull up in a big black SUV, and I've been on the farm sweating my ass off trying to save, what I had left. And And I said, why don't y'all just have the guts to pull out those pistols and shoot me? You've taken me, my money, my family, my name. I've lost everything. Says, and here you are threatening me to shut up and not tell what you did. You guys committed the crimes. It wasn't me. Calm down, calm down, calm down. Everything's gonna be all right. All that. But you just need to be quiet, or Judge Britt's going to do it again. And I said, well, tell him to bring it on. And, well, what they didn't tell me was that when I refused to shut up, they started threatening to make cases against my brothers and who were businessmen. And we caught one of them going, they were breaking the North Carolina FBI agents way out of jurisdiction in New York to his apartment. He caught him when he was supposed to be in New Zealand, where he also has offices. And one was coming, sneaking in the window from the what do you call it, the fire escape. My English is getting poor, a bit over here too long. And another one picking the locks. They came in. He said, "So what the hell are you doing breaking into my apartment?" Oh, we're with the FBI. They said, "Raleigh, North Carolina, you ain't got any jurisdiction here." So now we know about you people. They're going to try to plant, stinger devices to make the cases against him. My other brother, they threatened with IRS charges. Called his wife, scared her to death. Said, "If you don't get your brother-in-law to shut up, we're going to come after you." My other brother, they literally left something inside the door of a place where I was staying with him that they'd stolen out of my car at the post office. And I filed a police report so I could prove it all. Anyway, got back to my place and it was inside the door there. So, it was like a message, he's next.
Wow.
So that's when I decided to, fortunately, the consul general in New York had read my book, and wonderful lady, Ursula Gottschalk. So she and I were meeting, and she said, "Look, we got to get you out of here." And I had eye problems by then from no care. So she literally paid for my trip to Poland for eye surgery, got me a discount that was like 1/10 of what my doctor in North Carolina would charge. And I ended up coming, and they said, well, if you'll help us promote Poland, you've been a businessman and a banker and trustee and all that, you help us promote Poland and we'll help you and give you a safe place to stay. So I went home and sold everything I had. Didn't even tell my family where I was, so they couldn't harass them any further to pressure them about me, because nobody knew where I was for a year. And I met my wife, my now wife. She was my doctor and helped fix my teeth. And I had no care in prison, of course, for 7 years. You know how that goes. So fell in love, and we ended up being married. Been married for 10 years now, and living there happily. But I just got my passport renewed with Donald Trump in the White House and cleaning out that rat's nest over at the DOJ. But if I can sidetrack to the DOJ for a quick minute,
Absolutely.
they were searching how such a foul organization could be on the soil of North Carolina. Do you know the history of the DOJ?
For somewhat. Go ahead and
Well, it's not
educate me.
it's not in the Constitution, clearly.
Absolutely no, absolutely not.
Nor the FBI, which was created by an executive order by Teddy Roosevelt after
Yep.
Congress told him it was illegal and unconstitutional. But Ulysses S. Grant created the Department of Justice in 1871. He pushed it through Congress before the Southern states were allowed to come back into the Union. So I have a serious question about whether it's even legitimate or enforceable. But and they came up with it over a drinking game. How do I know that? Because his grandson was one of my partners in New York many years ago, and Ulysses S. Grant was the guy that came up with that to use it as a tool against his political enemies. And that's all it's ever has been, all it is today, all it ever will be. And that needs to end up on the scrap pile of history, because the states have that authority for everything except for international criminal activity. And if you read the Constitution, it says only in the case of piracy on the high seas and against laws of other nations and counterfeiting U.S. coin and securities. That's it. I never met a pirate or a counterfeiter the whole time I was in prison.
Wow. Now let me ask you this. Now you're a citizen of Poland now. You have dual citizenship.
No, I do not yet. No,
so
I have permanent residency here.
Permanent residency. Okay.
But I just got my U.S. passport renewed, and I think it's going to be safe. That I've been waiting for that crooked old judge, because he's let me know that if I come back to the United States, they'll make up a case against me again.
Wow. I think we should call his bluff. See what happens.
and give up my beautiful life over here. No, thank you, Barry, but I appreciate the sentiment.
Well, I love the fact that you got to meet the love of your life. God does work in mysterious ways, that is for sure. Let me ask you this, hands down, do you feel that Poland's judicial system operates a lot more efficiently than the United States justice system? Yes or no?
Amen. Yes, and that's how this Ursula Gotchek, the consul general in New York, was, because she had me come and talk to members of the EU Commission here that had transit from the communist system, like we now have in America, to a free judiciary. So that's why my story impressed her. She had me come to meet with them to say how foul it had gotten in America, and what could be done about it. But that was actually the reason for my first trip. But it's much, much, much better here. It's honest. The police don't pull anybody over for anything unless they see something violent happening. You don't hear ever of these cases of they're just fabricating cases, except for against politicians. That's now started, now that we have a socialist government. That was the first thing they did back in last year, was they tried to arrest their opponents like they did to Donald Trump. Like they've done in Romania recently. They're threatening in Germany and France like they just did to Marine Le Pen. That's their new method. But I've got to say, for a normal person just living their life, it's 1,000th less corrupt than the United States system of, quote, justice.
All right, and we're gonna talk about that right now. Everybody, I want to encourage you right now to take a look at this man's book, Justice Denied. Howell Woltz, his story, what he went through, and it can be corroborated. His story is real. I know it's real because I lived it, and there's not a J6er out there whose bond wasn't denied, that did not go through what Justice Denied takes you through. They know what happened. They know it's real. In America, we need to wake up and get united on this subject, because this is not how our country's supposed to operate. And it really puts into context what's going on and how out of control the Department of Justice really is. And I know in my heart of hearts that President Trump now knows how corrupt the system is, because they tried to do it to him. And if it wasn't for his billions of dollars and the success that he has created for himself in this life to fight back, I mean, America, you saw what they did to Donald Trump. What do you think they can do to people like you and me? Well, it's right here in this book, Justice Denied. You can get it off Amazon. You can get it off howwoltz.com. Am I correct about that? On your website?
It'll go to Amazon. That's where the order would end up anyway.
Okay. Well, Amazon, Justice Denied. I highly recommend you get a copy of it. I have left 3 copies at the Federal Library in FCI Miami, and another copy with an individual that is still in prison. And he makes it his point to get people to read this book. I can tell you that before I left federal prison, me and my cellmate were responsible for dozens upon dozens of inmates reading this book, and I really hope that that's continuing inside those walls. Justice Denied by Howell Woltz. It is worth the read. It's very entertaining, by the way. It's one of those page turners. You can't put it down. It really goes to my ADHD, because it's got really short chapters that are entertaining. So I'm just reading it, and then before you know it, I've already read the whole book in a couple hours and ready to do it again. So it's a very entertaining book. It's very well written and extremely informative of how corrupt our system is, and a lot of people that already know that. This can help you articulate your points in a much broader aspect of what you're trying to tell people of how corrupt it is. So I commend you for this artwork that you did, and I'm telling you right now, it's opening up eyes, and it's in the J6ers' hands, and they're shoving it down the throats of anyone that wants to listen. So let's go on to, lastly, Article 3. It's a court in Poland that will prevent major corruption within government and elected officials. Pretend that I'm somebody that has no clue what Article 3 is. Why should we bring Article 3 to America, and how do you see it helping our situation with the Department of Justice?
It is not my idea. It's one that many, many nations, as I mentioned, 160 nations around the world have courts of ombudsman. There is one here in Poland, and I have used it. I filed a charge when they were trying to force businesses like the clinic I'm in right now, my wife and I have. They tried to shut us down during COVID, and their own constitution said you can't do that. I've got a thing about constitutions these days. So I filed in the Court of Ombudsman, and we operated every day throughout the entire pandemic and really built the business because of it, because they could not legally stop us from operating under their own constitution. So I've used it, but it actually goes back to the Nordic countries, started in Scandinavia, Norway, Finland. Those were some of the first to do it, and they had very corrupt governments before they had it. Now they are the 1, 2, and 3 of the most clean and for the people governments, and I believe the courts of ombudsman are the reason. The idea, though, is that I've tried to pull together after 10 years of researching it and figuring out how to do it. You don't want it under the federal judiciary system because that's where the corruption is. So instead of having federal districts, like you remember, you mentioned Miami, the Southern District of Florida. And in North Carolina, for example, we have the Western, Middle, and Eastern districts. So you don't want to have anything to do with them. You want it with the congressional districts. So every congressional district has an election, maybe at the same time they elect their congressional representative every 2 years, and have someone who is a citizen and pays taxes in that district that has read the Constitution. That's it. That would like to run it, and they're elected by the people. They would then have the authority to have challenges. For example, when they threw you in solitary, wouldn't let you talk to a lawyer, violated your Speedy Trial Act limits of 70 days, you could have simply filed on toilet paper to the ombudsman court in that district, say I'm being held illegally, gone before the court. And if they were not following the Speedy Trial Act or not following the Sixth Amendment or whatever, judge could immediately order you to be released and then go after the sheriff and the attorney, the U.S. attorney and the judge that had illegally held you. Very powerful. And have the authority to charge them with violation of the Civil Rights Act, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242 for their conspiracy to deprive you of your rights and potentially go to jail for 10 years. That would stop it overnight. I don't know what that ombudsman would do after week number 1, put a few judges and prosecutors in jail, and they would clean it up very quickly.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying earlier that until there's consequences to be feared, these actions will continue to be taken, and so that is that deterrent that there will be consequences for prosecutorial misconduct and amongst other things, and that's what keeps people, I guess, kosher. They don't they're not likely to break laws and violate the Constitution if there's going to be punishment for doing so.
Well, right now, the only consequence of being a lying prosecutor is going to Congress or becoming a judge. That's,
Yeah.
that's your punishment. Like
Oh, wow.
like Adam Schiff, the biggest liar in Congress, was a prosecutor.
Oh,
Horrible
man.
people.
I just it goes back to what I like to say, and this isn't my saying. I've stole it fair and square from somebody else. We don't have a politician problem in America. We don't. We have a people problem. We have a people problem that don't get involved in our political process, that aren't paying attention. We, as Americans, we're distracted by sports and movies and entertainment, that we don't really ever take the time to open our eyes to what our elected officials are doing, what the bureaucrats in Washington are actually up to, what bills are being passed right underneath our noses in the late hours of the night, and 5,000-page bills, and that in the middle of it, says that it supports stuff on the Patriot Act. I mean, it's just egregious that we've allowed ourselves to be so complacent in our everyday lives that we've this system of corruption that's come around us. We've done that. We voted for it without even knowing, because of our lack of will to be involved and listen to people like yourself and amongst others. What do you say when you look at America today versus when you were younger? When do you think the moment in time is that we as Americans started to march forward towards this corrupt Department of Justice?
I think it is really only happening now to a serious extent, and I give full credit for that to Donald Trump. He's opened the eyes. When people can see that a billionaire man who never even had a speeding ticket can all of a sudden get 91 charges and 4 federal indictments on nonsense that, having worked on all these cases, I can tell you is complete bullshit. And they can do that to a president. Then now everybody knows that a local DA did it, a state court did it, a federal government did it against this one man, trying to put him in prison for life because he was running for office and people liked him and he wanted to change the system. So he's waking people up. And I don't care whether you love him or hate him, you got to give him credit. He's the one that exposed what they're doing, and he's now trying to fix it. So I wrote another book that he used for his First Step Act called Justice Restored, and that book was used in the First Step Act. And anyway, so that's how I've kept in touch with them since. And that administration, I believe they're going to do everything they can to fix this situation. I don't agree that the FBI can be fixed. It was unconstitutional in 1907 when Teddy Roosevelt proposed it. It's still unconstitutional. You can't find it in the book. And the states should be handling all of those things. If they want to collaborate on international crime, fine, and with other countries, but it shouldn't even exist. But hopefully they will at least flush it, clean it, and start it all over.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I believe that communistic ideals and communism itself has infiltrated a lot of our facilities, our departments, and our government. And communism is a cancer. Once it gets inside you, you can't just cut a little piece out. You got to remove all of it, or else it will grow back. And I think that you're absolutely right. It's a shame because I believe at one point in time the FBI was a noble institution with men and women that actually wanted to make a difference in the world and keep people safe and protect Americans. That ship has long since sailed, and the FBI of yesterday is not the FBI of today. And it's unfortunate, but I do agree with you that it needs to be completely abolished if we're ever going to see major change in the Department of Justice.
Amen.
Mr. Woltz, is there anything else that you would like to say to America about your story, about where we're going, where we've been, and give any advice for people watching that that they can take with them and be a supporter and a pillar and a warrior for this reform that we so desperately name in the Department of Justice? What would you say to them?
Well, first thing I would tell them now is to start watching The American Rising, of course, because I think you're going to have a hit on your hands for all the people that have been done wrong, which is 25% of the American citizenry have suffered some sort of felony charge, according to the Department of Justice in 2011. It's probably worse now. So you better wake up, because somebody in your family either has been or will be suffering this. And this show will wake them up. And I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. So keep it up. People start listening, pay attention, and do not trust anything you hear from the media about anything. There are only 6 corporations left, and ultimately they're all controlled by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So you're getting fed crap. And until you start doing your own homework and don't believe anything they tell you, do your own research, and you'll find out that every word you've heard from this gentleman here who went through it is true. And pay attention so you're not the next victim.
Absolutely. Where can people find what Howell Woltz is up to, social media? How can people get in touch with you to hear more of your story and to see how they can get involved in your life's work?
Well, I am don't want to upset you, but I'm on X quite a bit, and we're going to get you back on there very soon. So anyway, it is Woltz Howell, WOLTZ Howell on X.
I highly recommend to give this man a follow. Check out his website, howellwoltz.com. You can see it up there, see his whole story, and get a copy of this book. Arm yourself with the information needed that so you can articulate a conversation about the Department of Justice. This will give you a lot of different things and arm your toolbox with knowledge of how things are supposed to work versus how they actually are working. This has been a very defining moment for me, how to have your book sent to me while in prison, to read it, to email you. Of course, they wouldn't let you email me back. And then you responded. You got in touch with my fiance. We've kept in touch. You've kept in touch with Tom Jeffries and other people, and you never gave up. And you're still here today, voicing your opinions, talking about your truths and your facts, and you're not bending a knee. So, as the official spokesperson for January 6th, I would like to nominate you and let you know that you are an honorary member of January 6th, because you are the real first J6er. Your story, if we were only paying attention to your story then, we might have not went through as hard as we did when we went through the process. So, Hal, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. This is a true honor. I think you're a patriot. You're an American hero, and your story, I don't think, has been even done, is none being told yet, just like ours. Thank you again, Hal. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Justice Denied by Howell Woltz. You will get to see exactly what the J6ers were talking about long before J6 even happened. So, Hal, thank you for your time. Again, check out his website, and he writes for richardsonpost.com on a regular basis. And I highly recommend taking the time to get to know this individual. Follow him on social media. Hal, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. I'm gonna bring you backstage. You can leave, and I'll call you back after I end the show, or you can stick around. It's up to you. Thank you again, Hal. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just God bless you guys for what you're doing, and keep it up. And your lady was so behind you. She supported you so much. So God bless Desiree as well.
Oh, shit. I'm a lucky man, Hal. I'm a lucky man. She is my better half by tenfold. Thank you, sir. Hal, I really do appreciate you taking the time. Again, Justice Denied. Get the book. It's incredible. Thank you, Hal. God bless you, sir.
Take care and best of luck.
You will be in my life for the rest of it, sir. I can promise you that.
Thank you, sir.
Take care. Well, I didn't want to really make the show, and I'm not going to make the show about January 6th, because life and the situations that we're involved with now, January 6th is just an example. It's not where we should begin. This story of weaponization of our Department of Justice, it's started a long time ago, as you heard, and America got to see it on a front stage when they put Donald Trump through the ringer with the false indictments and the false charges. And here we are. And the question is now, what are you going to do about it? Well, it's not hard, but it's something that we continuously fail to do. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in less than a year, we're going to have the primary and midterm seasons pick up. Historically speaking, conservatives do not show up to the primaries, and they do not show up to the midterms. As you heard me state, America does not have a politician problem. America has a people problem. And we need to end that now. America, if we do not show up to the midterm elections and keep the House and the Senate, then Hakeem Jeffries will be the new Speaker of the House. And they will stop at nothing at preventing Donald Trump and the America First agenda from going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we showed up to the elections on November 5th, and we had a triumphant success. We accomplished something that personally I didn't think was going to happen. Not because it organically couldn't, because the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA would not allow it. But I believe that the numbers were so massive and people showed up because they did the research on their own and they learned their own truths. And they showed up on November 5th, and we elected for this, well, the third time, but the second official time, an individual who truly cares about this country and is not a corrupt politician embedded with the swamp monsters and the bureaucrats that are plaguing our nation. He is an outsider. He is a true American, and he is fighting for this nation. I want to thank everyone right now for taking the time to watch this. I would like to request that you guys get on Rumble, Getter, Truth Social, YouTube at Ramey is Right, and follow me, because we won't be here forever. This will not be allowed to continue to go on forever, because we are speaking about things that you're never going to see on MSNBC. You're not going to see on Fox News. And we are the alternative media. And if you want to continue to see things, then you need to support us. You need to follow at Tilo Pod and on Rumble at The War Boys. And you need to follow people like us, because our voices will be silenced. We will not be here forever. And we are going to offer an alternative to what you are told every single day and allow you to be the judge. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate this opportunity. This is a defining moment for my life, and I love this country very much. I'm not going to continue to apologize for loving America. America is the greatest country on earth. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This is the American Rising. My name is Barry Ramey, and I love America. You all, and thanks for tuning in. Love this country very much.
Of a new administration. As I said, we've done this before.
Isn't necessarily the best place to start. In fact, I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction. But as
you condemn white supremacy. And he fumbled around, didn't say anything. I said, how about the Proud Boys? And he said, well,
Ronald Reagan was 2 months into his presidency when John Hinckley Jr. blew a $20 million about blowing up the White House.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look what happened